Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Screw Space podcast. Today, we have got another episode in the mini series of Boots to Boardroom, in which I chat with a lot of the ex-mill guys that have transitioned over from the mill to the corporate world and how they have actually done that transition and their journey along the way. Today's guest is Sam Flockhart, and I won't do the background because that's pretty much going to do the episode of it, so Sam can take us through it. But Sam, as a very brief introduction, what are you up to these days at this moment, mate?
My name's Sam Flockhart. I'm the head of cyber threat management for Santander UK. We do lots of different things, but primarily sort of the team covers cyber threat intelligence, a little bit of sort of red team security control tests, and then more recently fraud fusion as well.
Nice, okay. And you've also got a beard and hair that I am envious of, alongside all of that. So I'll try not to be too jealous whilst I'm speaking to you over the next half an hour, mate. Okay. But cool. Okay, so Sam, take me back then. Take me back to obviously when you were joining the mill. What was the plan? Was it always the plan to join the mill? And essentially, how did it all begin then for you, mate?
I wouldn't say it was always the plan. So my mother and father were both in the army. They were both sort of army officers. When I was leaving school, it was Afghanistan that was going on, and it was something I was always wanting to do. But in Scotland, we get pre-university tuition, and I got the surprise. It surprised myself more than anyone by managing to get the grades that allowed me to go to university to do that course first. So went to university, and then kind of joined like the TA, the sort of reserve army, where you could kind of test it, weekend soldier type of thing, and get used to that. I think halfway through my degree, I was pretty sure I was gonna join the army, so that's how that happened. Yeah.
And were you kind of going down the education route to kind of get in at officer level? Was that the reason, or?
Well, kind of, yeah. Well, as I said, my mother and father were both officers, and then at university you do the officer training course, so you kind of go through the training for that. I did sort of main board in Westbury, but I think I was a little bit sort of put off really during that sort of officer training core part of it. I wasn't adamant or wasn't sure that an army officer, like I was from sort of just a normal guy from Dundee, single parent family, had my nose broken about 15 times before I was even, leaving school. So that, the idea of sort of some of the people we were training with coming from St Andrews with the maroon trousers, and I'm not sure I would have been the best fit for that. But I did have the sort of the good education, and I was really intrigued by the intelligence corps in that. Um, I think it's something like a third of the in corps soldiers are sort of failed officers, and I kind of viewed myself as such. So I think it was more, it was definitely more up my street in terms of, my degree was in international relations, history, and politics, and
Okay.
so it was that kind of it just fit in nicely in terms of world affairs, current affairs, knowledge of what was going on in the world, and fitting into those intelligence roles. And, it was quite, the selection for the Encore was, equally challenging anyway. So, I don't regret my choice, and I think everything worked out. But yeah, that's how it happened for me.
Yeah, okay. So you kind of segued perfectly then. So it's the int corp that you were kind of like, cool, that's where I want to go, and it relates to your degree as well, because you kind of get that you kind of get that segue into geopolitics and how I can actually put this into action. Because look, the amount of people that I speak to, even not even just in the work life, in personal as well, including myself, you have your degree and then you end up being something completely different. I've got a degree in psychology and I work in cybersecurity sales. Yes, I can make the argument like, yeah, well, it's people, isn't it? I've got to understand people. It's a tenuous link, Sam. I'm sure that you can get into cyber sales without having a psychology degree, but that's it. I'd say that, like, look, I think that your degree has actually set you up on this path, which is, I would say, one of the few. I'm not saying that all, but the few. So yeah, so take me now. So you're at the training program for the Incorp, and is it what you were expecting? Is it kind of like, oh, it's tough, it's not what I expected? Talk to me about them early days then.
Yeah, so I mean, so obviously the first thing you do before you kind of even get to the in course, you've got to do, I don't know, what is it, 16, 18 weeks at Purbright, which is, training as a soldier first. So it wasn't just in code that we were training with; it was sort of soldiers from across all the different cat badges, and everyone kind of goes through the same pain there. So you kind of do that soldier first piece, and then you do your specialist intelligence training. So I think that was then another, I can't remember what it was, something like another 7 months of before you're even qualified as an intelligence operator.
Yep.
So most, I think some of those services they do sort of intelligence training for 3 or 4 weeks. Our training was something like 20 something weeks. So by the time you actually came out, went through a really world class training establishment in military intelligence operations as well.
Yep.
I loved the training that we had. It was really, really good, really, really tough. Um, and then that basically qualified you as a general intelligence operator. Now, it was quite funny because even wider parts of the army doesn't really know what the Inco kind of does, and you kind of get sold, well, you can be James Bond or the different. I think there's different sort of specialist trades within the Inco that you can then later on in your career go into. But at that point, you're just kind of a general military intelligence operator. You've done your basic intelligence training, probably fairly advanced, for a private sector equivalent or whatever, and then your kind of career really begins, and you kind of go from there.
Okay. Okay. So training's done, and it's to a really high standard. And like you said there, it's parallel with, yeah, like the crash course is unrivaled. In the commercial world, it'll take you years to get the exposure to the sort of level of knowledge and work and experience that you have now had. So you've gone through the training, you've survived. They've tried to basically get out the weeds from yeah, like you say, the soldier first training, and I'm sure a lot of people did drop out, but no, it just whet your appetite for it, and now you're like, cool, intelligence. I've gone through my degree, I've gone through the training, and yeah, I'm here. This is what I want to do now. But cyber's not yet on the in the crosshairs, is it? It's just like you just want to be in intelligence. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's it. So I did. I think it was 9 years, bang on 9 years by the time I left. Didn't really touch cyber at all. So as I said at the start, it was kind of all very Afghanistan focused. So I did some COIS roles and tactical questioning, and very much like that tactical intelligence picture that we were involved and with Afghanistan at the time. I was really lucky throughout my entire career that I didn't really have any, or not that many kind of boring jobs or rubbish roles, because you would in the army you would move, sometimes every 2 3 years, but sometimes even a year or so into your career.
Yeah.
But I kind of went from really interesting role to really interesting role. So within 18 months of being out of training, I was in China and Beijing working for the embassy out there, doing strategic intelligence on Chinese military modernizations and all this cool stuff. And then, I think of that time period, you had the annexation of the Crimea, this sort of bigging up of the Russia threat. And really, from the time I come back from China, I was primarily sort of a Russia kind of human terrain analyst looking at the sort of incoming Russian threat, hybrid warfare. And that did then start to link in a little bit with cyber when you were looking at, Russian GRU some of the intelligence services. And again, whether it kind of went from unit to unit over the next few years, did a lot of really good stuff. Was constantly out abroad, doing different operations in Europe and North Africa and elsewhere. But yeah, I was always quite lucky that I had my little niche field. I was became a specialist in Russia and Ukraine, and all those things really kind of then set me up for a career in cyber when I decided to leave, sort of after 8 9 years. Because I'd done sort of the intelligence techniques and training, which we talked about. I still use these, and my team used some of the techniques and skill set that I was taught at Chicksands at Templar in my cyber world for cyber threat intelligence analysis. Obviously, looking at Russia and Ukraine and getting a really good understanding of the geopolitical picture, the cultural understanding of what's going on, and we use that again in the cyberspace and the cyber threat landscape all the time. So it kind of just then, all came together when I decided to have children. I think at that point I wanted to leave. I wanted to get more money. I think it was just the right time for me to leave the
Mm.
army.
Mm.
And when I was looking at intelligence roles that were available, It was cyber primarily that was the ones coming up.
Nice, nice. And just before we do segue over to the transition between the two worlds, what do you think? You've already touched on it anyway, but what sort of skills do you think you had picked up during this time in China and the Russia-Ukraine, where you're like, okay, this is skills not just for right now. This is personal skills for my home life, just experience on how to handle resilience. But then also now that you have got the ability of hindsight, what skills have you got to kind of picked up that set up that trampoline into cyber?
Yeah, I think there's lots. I mean, knowledge is obviously one of those things, knowledge and experience which you gain. So, I've got a really good understanding, like you say, the geopolitical stuff. But I think it's almost the communication skills that I think really went a long, or really go a long way. Where even as a junior NCO, Lance Corporal, I was working directly for brigadiers, defence attaches, brief and senior, defence ministers all throughout my career, generals, American generals, people from lots of senior sort of commanders and people that just don't have the time. And so you were learning about time management, you learn about delivering the so what's and the key points, the communication skills. So all those sort of things, even sometimes speaking to large audiences as a public speaker, 800 soldiers that are just tired and just want you to shut up, and things like that. So tough audiences. I don't think you're going to get a tougher audience than sort of 800 infanteers just waiting to get out the door on their PDT training or whatever. So those types of things definitely. The intelligence, operations, and analysis. So I think as we spoke last time, where um, you coming out into the private sector, into the civilian world, but you've seen how world class big organizations do intelligence operations. Whether that's NATO or some of the other ones. Big exercises, strategic level exercises, and you kind of understand how to operationalize intelligence. Whether that's in the business context, whether that's in the cyber context, or most of my career was spent in the kinetic space. So if I think back to it, there's just so many skills I can go through. We did, like you said, you study psychology. We got little bits of that in terms of tactical question and interrogation things. Some of the courses you would do, and do I really use it? I kind of use it mostly against my wife and kids. Like when my kids are trying to, manipulate, they start manipulating you first, by the way.
Man,
And then you kind of.
that is the biggest battlefield that you'll be on, the one with your kids, mate.
But so you kind of use these skill set, but whether it's sometimes just dealing with adversity, dealing with challenges, certainly in the people management space. The army has got the British Army's got the best leadership training courses and experience in the world. So you're coming into teams managing people, and sometimes it's a breeze because of the sort of issues you had to deal with in the military career. So yeah, I think I could probably go on forever, but those 9 years weren't wasted. They gave me a really strong foundation, a real self confidence to then go out into the private sector world and try and make it a success.
Fantastic, fantastic, and yeah, let's move over to that world then. And obviously, you picked a fantastic time to make the jump, didn't you, Sam? When you were making the transition over. So I believe was it the pandemic when you were like, yeah, do you know what? I'll go job hunting now. But yeah, talk to me about that transition. So I know you mentioned earlier that it was just tough in terms of the kids and everything like that. So talk to me about
Yeah, crazy time, crazy time. So I was leaving the army, resettled. Push a button, and in the army you get like a year to resettle, and you can usually do courses. You get a lot more, depending on your unit, depending on what's going on, but you get some time to, apply for jobs and learn new skills, etc. Issue was, I think it was almost straight into my resettlement. Then COVID happened, and effectively the world shut down, and even the army really sent its people home. Um, so there was kind of positive and negatives to that. I just had a old baby girl, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I left. But we were then, you kind of dealing with COVID. The whole world shut down. Yes, I'm getting lots of time with her to spend and develop, but then I need to find a new career. I need to find a new job, and I was really, really proactive about it. Um, The issue was I'd never really done any cyber, right? So I didn't really understand cyber that much. I knew how to sell myself, like on those sort of points that we kind of talked about, knowledge of intelligence operations, delivering SOLWATs, communication, and I would really prepare well for every interview where I knew that cyber knowledge was the most important thing, being able to demonstrate that. And I had a lot of good interviews, big organizations, Deloitte, Sky, Lloyd's, I think Royal Mail, lots of people were trying to hire cyber threat intelligence roles, and I was getting to sort of third, fourth stages with some of these companies. But the problem was COVID meant that they were pulling all the roles. There was a lot of uncertainty in the job market, and so even though I think you were getting really good feedback and you were kind of moving things along, spending a lot of time preparing for the interviews. And if you had the interview on a Wednesday, you spend Monday, Tuesday just preparing, trying to do everything you could, and then the role would be pulled from you. So one after one, that kind of happened. That was my experience. Um, and then into the summer, I finally got a contract role. So it wasn't a permanent fixed position, but what it was a senior cyber threat intelligence analyst role, looking at the strategic level with a great organisation that was called Refinitiv. Now it's London Stock Exchange Group, so a big sort of financial sector player, really, really good team there. Um, and really, it was only a 6 months contract, but the money was very good, and um, like I think I explained to you, all I needed it was 6 months where I can then put that on my CV and I can say I have done a cyber threat intelligence analyst role. So when it came to Christmas time, I was applying for the next role. If I applied for say 10 CTI roles, I would get 9 interviews.
Yep.
Whereas the first time around, having never done the job, I could apply for 50, maybe get one or two. So there's a massive difference in terms of just getting your foot in the door, getting that cyber job role on the CV, and once you've done that, even just for 6 months, you are kind of laughing in a sense. So that worked out really for me. In terms of sort of sometimes you just need someone to give you that chance. And like I said, like I didn't really know that much about cyber, but I could anticipate the questions that you might get asked, and I always had like little bits of knowledge, and I hadn't done that many courses, So a lot of people when they're trying to get into cybersecurity, they get fixated on what do I need to get? Some of these cyber, as you know, they're incredibly expensive. SANS CTI courses or CREST CTI courses. Some of the SANS ones, 9 grand, something like that. Most people can't afford to do that, and I didn't really have that much on my CV at all. But what I did do then is, I did lots of knowledge. So whether it was if I was applying for a cyber threat role, I would obviously look at the organization I was applying for, try and work out what their cyber threats would be, and then just have examples all based on open source and Google, of well, this Russian APT, which that was something I was interested in, right? Because of my background, so I could talk about Fancy Bear APT 28. They're associated with Russian GRU. They use hammer toss malware in order to, hide their C2 traffic and steganography, and they blend it into Twitter images and all this kind of technical stuff. Didn't really know much context outside of that because I hadn't done cyber roles, but I had done, personal research and knowledge. And I think that just is kind of one of the key points I would say to anyone who is trying to make that jump from, I say a military intelligence role and a cyber role, that the knowledge is much more important in my experience than the ticks in the box courses type thing.
Absolutely, I couldn't echo that enough in the sense of like, yeah, I've done a few podcasts now, and I think I mentioned in actually in our intro chat, Sam, that there was a pod with Rob Anderson, who was a former police inspector, police investigator, and he didn't have the technical side at the start, but he'd done sort of like hostage situations, and it's all about okay, we need to barricade off the street so there's no pedestrians going by. These are the points of entry. We need to like an eye on them. The technical side can be added. But that workflow that you're on about now is like you've got that and you understand how to deal with attacks and intelligence and putting that into actionable sort of workflows, like you say. Um, I just wanted to just rewind a second and just say, like, why do you think that it takes those people moving from the mill to the commercial world a little bit of time to get that rolling and not immediately? I appreciate yours was a bit of an anomaly because we had a bit of a flu going around at the time. But essentially, You're not the first to say like, yeah, it took me a while to get that first role, but everyone that I spoke to are ex-mil. They have that first role, and then bang, it's like a rocket ship. They're off and they fly up. And going back to what you said at the start of the podcast, that first 6 months that you've had training is just if you put that in comparative with someone on the 6 months on the outside, it's like that to that. So why is that not being replicated in the job market? What's your thoughts on that, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the full answer, but I think it is, the certainly in my experience, and I try my best to do this with a lot of the roles. So if you've got someone who's leaving, the army as a veteran, service leaver, Navy, wherever, RAF, um, even the police, right? You've got someone with huge amounts of life experience, someone with real credible leadership skills, and someone that, okay, they might not have all the answers at the start, but will have a personality and a drive, usually, not 100% of the time, but someone that can really, make things succeed. So I think it is a very lucrative job market to recruit from. Um, because also, military people are used to suffering. So, they're willing to suffer, they're willing to put the extra shift in because that's just how they've operated day to day. They couldn't survive in these roles without that. So, you are getting excellent candidates from it. I think sometimes it's the interview bit that lets either service leaders down in that you're going to get asked, say, for example, I'm hiring for a cyber threat intelligence analyst, have you done the role before? No. So do you know how to do this? No. Do you know how to, what kind of things would you look for if you were investigating an IP? Don't really know because I've never really done it, and I think that's where sometimes there's that element, have you worked for a bank before? No. And sometimes that's, for me, it's not important, but some of the people want that, okay, this person is used to working in the private sector, understands the lingo, understands relationships and how that works. And I don't know if there's any real answer for it. I mean, I think there's a great place to recruit from, with all the veterans and the military leavers, and all you need is someone to give you a chance. And I think that these people always do really well. I think sometimes the emphasis is on that service leaver just to maybe do prepare for that interview in a different way, or try and like reword their CV or reword their answers, moving away from all the military lingo and the military way of talking to translating that into sort of business speak and private sector speak, which is a difficult skill to learn. And I think that's where maybe some of the transition workshops and some of the resettlement programs for the army should look at.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a terrific point because, like I said, there is untapped potential there. And yeah, I just think that like it should be getting mopped up. But there is a lot of vets that are still sort of like looking for work. But when I was still in the recruitment game, I knew of the quality there, so it helped me out because I was like, right, I'm going to go to these guys and get these in front of that. I just wanted to bring you to after the contract then. So obviously you've had that 6 months, and it probably was a contract's probably a really good sort of stepping stone into the commercial world because you at the same time are like, cool, I'll take, with putting it lightly, I'll take anything. Do you know what I'm trying to say? That I'll take anything. I just want to get into the commercial sector at this moment in time, and then we can start going from there. Because like you rightly said, cyber was still new to you, so it's like cool. I don't know if I want to go into SOC or instant response or threat intelligence or whatever it might have been. Like I might want to go into management. So I'm sure you were still sort of like just finding your feet on the industry alone. So you had that contract. Did you already have your next role lined up, or did it come to the end of the 6 months and you're like, oh no, I'm back to square one now? Like, what's going to happen here?
So not really. So I think in the last sort of 6 weeks or whatever of the 6 month period, I was obviously applying. I think it was Christmas time. I was applying for roles, knowing in the new year that they might have offered me an extension, but I didn't want to really, kind of go. Well, I need an extension, or I don't. I wanted to have options, once I came to that point. So I was applying for, the different roles, and like I said, the second time, having got it on the CV, having got, I've used, I don't know whether it's Virus Total Intel 471, some of the tools. I've been, involved in incidents and investigations with FBI at 2 o'clock in the morning, because that's kind of what that first role really gave me. Um, I've used some of the technical, I've gained a lot of technical understanding. So yeah, when it came round to it, actually, I did have more than one option in the second round to apply for. Ended up going for Royal London, which is a big insurance firm in the UK. they were setting up a CTI team and they wanted someone who understood, the CTI operational side. And they already had quite a technical team. And, I did that for a year and that was, the team, they were really good fun, really good, team that we had there. So, that was really great as well. Um, but that was more just about, okay, we're starting from scratch. We were building something and we want to put the sort of foundations of an operation in place. um, so I did that for a year and then got the manager's role at Santander, which was where I've been sort of over the last 4 years. So yeah, that's how that happened. But I think like I say, in that 6 month time doing the contract role, we had incidents, we had we got to look at malware. We got to speak with cool intelligence organizations in the United States and get involved in all that stuff. Use lots of different tools, and straight away that just made a big difference. You are a CTI analyst now. You know how to use these tools, and that then puts you in a very small percentage of maybe CVs that are applying for some of these other roles.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I suppose obviously, like you say, the you got great exposure with sort of like your first 6 month contract. You got great exposure again in another different commercial environment in the sense of they're building up a CTI sort of landscape from scratch. And obviously, same to nowadays, you're at Santander. Obviously, I would hope that it wasn't Greenfield CTI there, and they did actually have a process in place. So that's a new experience for you as well. It's like you're constantly okay. You get settled, you pop the bubble, and you go again. So how obviously talk to me about today and how has it been different and what you're still learning?
Well, every day. That's the thing about cyber. You learn something every day. And one of the other things I've learned that might help people, looking to get into cyber is that there's hardly anyone in cyber that really understands everything about cyber, right? So everybody else is learning too. Even the people with the CISP and the CISM and some of the fancy qualifications, people who've been working in networking for a long time, that something will come up and everyone kind of knows something about their own field, but there's so many disciplines and specialisms. So every day, everybody, I think, working in cyber is learning. And yeah, so moved into Santander, people management role. So you're managing a team, very, very mature setup, very, very good sort of external engagements liaison. It's got that brand to it that then allows you to sort of speak all the time with lots of bigger organizations and have a profile. And really, it's kind of about sort of trying to continue to improve something that was already well built up, but we can improve it here. I think a lot of it's kind of like understanding your own environment is one of the big things I've taken away. So even again, going back to the military skill set, I think it's, you kind of referred to it. You can't do a threat evaluation as a CTI analyst without understanding your own environment first. In the same way, like if you were in Afghanistan and you were doing a threat evaluation of the Taliban or what other Pashtun militias or whatever the battlefield might be, the commander still needs to know things like what speed does that river run at because he wants to know if you can get tanks across it or, that's the vital ground there in the built terrain. This is the main MSR that you have to kind of constantly monitor for because that's where all the IDs are going to get placed. Yeah. And that's the same thing on the cyber side where you need to understand your network. So what kind of devices are defending the perimeter? What does your sort of internal sentinel endpoint kind of protections look like? Firewalls and that kind of castle defense type thing is just a direct analogy, right? So it's challenging to do that in big organizations. The bigger the organization, then the harder that is. And that's kind of some of the ways in I think which we've tried to mature and develop the program is trying to make the threat intelligence a lot more relevant to our internal customers or internal consumers. All the different teams that can benefit from what our visibility and foresight is. So even coming into a mature team, there's still loads of different ways you can take it and lots of different things you can do. So, it's been a brilliant experience so far, with Santander as well.
Fantastic, fantastic. And Sam, that pretty much brings us directly to our time. So I just want to extend a great thanks to you once again for coming on the Screw Space podcast. And if anybody's got any questions for Sam, his journey from the mill to the commercial world, so to where he's at today with Santander, if you just need to drop Sam a line, say, like, look, I just need some help with this, then I hope I've not opened up the floodgates for you, Sam, but I know that you'll be happy to help. And yeah, so once again, mate, thank you very much for coming on the Screw Space podcast.
Yeah, no, cheers. Thank you, Nick. Thanks for having me.